everybody. Today we're going to talk about dismantling dysfunction and within the organizational breakdown and behavioral remedies in the book A Savage Factory. Now, imagine, clocking into a factory where sabotage is routine, the morale is really non existent, and the leadership really operates like a dictatorship. Well, that was Ford's Sharonville transmission plant in the 1970s, captured in a very brutal detail by Robert Dewar in his memoir, A Savage Factory. Now, today, I'll walk you through three major organizational problems that Dewar witnessed and how we can use modern behavior theories to not only understand them, but to also fix them. Right now, a Savage Factory, it was more than just a memoir. It was a masterclass, really, in what happens when leadership fails. The culture starts to decay, and fairness just totally disappears right out the window, right? And in this presentation, I'll identify three core problems in the book, which is going to be number one, your toxic leadership with the lack of motivation. Number two, the adversarial culture and the absence of shared purpose, along with number three, which is going to be with a perceived inequity and low morale. Now, then what I'll do is apply all three of these powerful organizational behavior theories, which is the expectancy theory, my goal setting theory, and my equity theory, to really propose solutions that really could have transformed the factory floor. Now, starting with number one, the toxic leadership and the lack of motivation. Now, the ward really describes supervisors who really barked orders, right? They really ignored the input and they treated, the workers like they were just disposable tools. In that scenario, motivation is just totally gone out of the window, right? Now, if you were to enter the expectancy theory in that scenario, which says that motivation really depends on three beliefs, right? With number one being expectancy, which is the question, really, will my effort lead to performance, right? Number two would be, instrumentality, which is, bears the question, will my performance lead to rewards, right? And thirdly, would be balance, which is, the question I ask myself, do I even care about any of those rewards that I just mentioned, right? Now, in Sharonville, all three of these were broken, right? The workers, they really didn't, believe that the effort that they were given even mattered. They didn't really trust the rewards. And then at the same time, they didn't value the outcomes, right? So the solution would really be to like rebuild the system. And you might say, well, how do you rebuild the system? Well, you can start off with train the workers, and you can fix the equipment to really restore that expectancy, right? Another thing you could do is, tie the performance, into real rewards, which might look something like, bonuses, promotions, or even something as simple as just respect, right? And then, thirdly, to align those rewards with what workers actually value. In a lot of cases, you'll find out that what the workers really value is things as simple as safety, pride and autonomy, right? Now, secondly, the adversarial culture and the lack of shared purpose, right? Now, the factory wasn't just dysfunctional, it was also hostile, right? The sabotage was coming and absenteeism rampant. Now, there was no shared mission. And so, in this scenario, that is where the goal setting theory comes in, right? Because it tells us that specific challenging goals, when embraced by the team, it really drives performance, right? But in Sharonville, the goals were really, really, really vague. They were, imposed top down, and they really focused only on, the quantity. So in that scenario, I would say that the solution would be, things like, we could involve the workers in setting goals that are tied to the quality and the safety, right? You could even make goals measurable, right? Like for an example, you could say, reduce the defect rate by 10%, right? Or, something like, providing feedback loops, which might look something like including like daily huddles, dashboards, maybe even something like, peer recognition, right? And then also you could do something like linking the goals directly to the purpose, which something like, which might look something like, we build transmissions that protect lives, right? Now, the problem number three, the third problem was, the perceived inequality and the low morale that was there at Ford. And Dewar's co-workers, they really saw the managers earning more while they were doing less. And the promotions, it seemed, were more political, if anything. And the recognition was basically non-existent at all, right? And so in that case, that's like a textbook case for equity theory, right? Which the equity theory, says that people really compare their input output ratio to others, right? And if they feel, that they're unfair, then they'll really disengage, right? And so a solution, to something like this, might be in the form of, conducting like equity audits, which would include things like maybe, review the pay, workload, or even, recognition. Another thing would be maybe to create like a more transparent promotion criteria that's really based on the skill along with the peer review, right? Maybe even something like celebrating contributions, publicly, especially from your frontline workers, right? Doing things like that is going to help boost the morale, and make people, want to work, harder for you, right? You could even host like open forums, right? And in those open forums, there could be feedback and like fairness improvements, right? Now, when we talk about like how we can like integrate all of these theories, the three theories that we just talked about, right? And these theories, they don't work, in isolation. They actually reinforce each other. Okay. And so, like, for instance, the expectancy theory really builds the belief in the effort, of the outcomes, where the goal setting theory really channels the effort into meaningful, objectives. Excuse me. And then, with the equity theory, it's going to really like ensure that the system feels fair and sustainable. And see, so together, uh, they all, offer a blueprint, for the transformation. Right now, Ford, you know, he could have started, with leadership reform, or even, and then had that followed by, like a cultural reset, and then a motivational strategy. Because, in my opinion, that's how you would turn an organization that's something like the Savage Factory into, a company that's more purpose, driven, more of a purpose driven powerhouse, so to speak, right? And so, you know, as a as a conclusion, or a reflection to the Savage Factory, um, it really seems that a Savage Factory is like more of a warning. You know what I'm saying? It's like a warning, and it's like it's also a roadmap, because it shows us how, what really happens when organizations, they lose sight of their people. But then at the same time, it also reminds us that, with the right tools, things like your behavioral science, your empathy, and strategy, we can actually rebuild trust and motivation along with purpose. And these lessons, aren't just for factories, but they're for every team, every leader, and every organization that really wants to thrive right now. Leadership isn't about control, it's about connection. Thanks for watching and have a great day.